Always drunk. That's what they said about George Burley during his darkest year in football. But the truth behind those crushing allegations reveals a story of principle over politics and a manager who refused to bow down when powerful men tried to control his every move. In 2005, George Burley achieved something remarkable. He took Derby County from relegation strugglers to championship playoff contenders, finishing fourth despite having virtually no transfer budget. This wasn't luck. This was pure managerial genius. Burley had transformed a sinking ship into promotion hopefuls through shrewd free transfers and developing young talent. Players like Inigo Idiaquez, Morton Bisgard, and Tommy Smith became inspired captures under his guidance. But behind the scenes, a battle was brewing. Derby had appointed Murdo Mackay as director of football in October 2003, a relatively new concept in English football that many traditional managers struggled with. Mackay's role was initially unclear, but rumours soon spread about disagreements and meddling in team affairs. Burley knew something was wrong 6 months before he actually left, telling Chief Executive Jeremy Keith that he simply couldn't work with the director of football anymore. The breaking point came with Tom Huddlestone. Derby's promising young midfielder was sold to Tottenham without Burley's knowledge or consent. Imagine that. A manager who'd built his team from scratch, suddenly discovering one of his key players had been flogged behind his back. Chairman John Slightholme had made the decision at board level, completely bypassing the man who actually coached the lad every day. For Burley, this wasn't just about losing a player. It was about respect, trust, and the fundamental right of a manager to shape his own squad. He'd worked miracles with no money, yet when it came to keeping his best young talent, he wasn't even consulted. The betrayal cut deep. Then came the allegations. Newspaper reports suggested Burley had supervised training whilst drunk. Derby County publicly denied launching an internal inquiry, but behind closed doors, they reportedly asked players to confirm the accusations. Here's what really matters. The players refused to give evidence. Every single one of them stood by their gaffer. They knew the real George Burley, and they weren't having any of it. Burley was deeply hurt by these claims. A man who dedicated his life to football, who'd turned around club after club through sheer hard work and tactical nows, was being painted as unprofessional. But the timing tells you everything. These allegations surfaced just as his relationship with Mackay reached breaking point, just as the Huddlestone sale had made his position untenable. It felt like a coordinated attack on his character. On June 7, 2005, Burley resigned from Derby County. His statement cited an ongoing issue which has proved impossible to resolve, and his position becoming increasingly untenable. Those who knew football understood. This wasn't about results or ability. This was about a proud manager who refused to be a puppet. Within weeks, Heart of Midlothian came calling. New owner Vladimir Romanov had big plans, and Burley was excited about the fresh start. He even said working with Romanov was one of the reasons he joined Hearts. Little did he know he was walking into an even bigger storm. What happened next was nothing short of sensational. Under Burley's leadership, Hearts won their first 8 league matches, equalling a club record set back in 1914. They shot to the top of the Scottish Premier League, and suddenly everyone was talking about a potential title challenge. For a club outside the old firm of Rangers and Celtic, this was extraordinary stuff. Hearts fans were buzzing. After years of mediocrity, they had a manager who could compete with the big boys. Burley's tactical acumen was on full display as his team dismantled opponent after opponent. The football was flowing, the results were coming, and everything seemed perfect. But Romanov had different ideas about how football should work. The Lithuanian businessman began interfering in signings, bringing in players like Samuel Kamazzola and Ibrahim Tall without Burley's recommendation. When Burley's own targets didn't materialise, Romanov simply went ahead and signed who he wanted anyway. This was a manager's nightmare, having players foisted upon you that didn't fit your system or philosophy. Burley tried to stay diplomatic, initially saying there would be no interference in team selections, but privately, he was growing increasingly uncomfortable with Romanov's hands-on approach. The owner wanted control over every aspect of the football side, from transfers to tactics to team selection. On October 21, 2005, Romanov increased his shareholding in Hearts to 55.5%. The very next day, he sacked George Burley. Scottish football was stunned. Here was a manager sitting pretty at the top of the league, having just achieved a record-equalling start to the season, and he was being shown the door. Chairman George Folks cited irreconcilable differences as the official reason. Everyone knew what that really meant. Burley wouldn't bend the knee to Romanov's interference, and Romanov wouldn't tolerate a manager who wanted actual control over his team. The timing was no coincidence. Romanov had just secured majority control of the club, and his first act was to remove the one man who might challenge his authority. It didn't matter that Hearts were flying high in the league. It didn't matter that fans were dreaming of silverware. What mattered was who was really in charge. Years later, Romanov would make even more serious allegations against Burley. In a 2023 interview, the former owner claimed Burley had a heavy drinking problem and had simply walked out during a meeting about a new contract. According to Romanov, Burley went for a smoke break and never came back. But those who were actually there tell a very different story. Simon Hunt, Burley's assistant at Hearts, completely denied claims of a drinking problem and pointed out that Burley wasn't even a smoker. Former chairman George Folks stated that neither he nor chief executive Phil Anderton believed Romanov's allegations about drinking. Folks even suggested that Romanov wanted these smears to be made public, hinting at the owner's jealousy over Burley getting credit for the team's success. The truth becomes clear when you look at the pattern. At Derby, allegations surfaced just as Burley clashed with the hierarchy. At Hearts, similar claims emerged years later from the very man who'd sacked him. These weren't genuine concerns about professionalism. They were character assassinations designed to justify controversial decisions. What's remarkable is how the football world responded to Burley's troubles. Within months of leaving Hearts, Southampton came calling in December 2005. Then, in January 2008, he was appointed manager of the Scotland national team. The game's decision-makers knew the truth. George Burley wasn't the problem. Hearts fans were stunned by his sacking, especially with the team flying high. Media outlets described the decision as shocking and surprising. When Romanov appointed Graham Rix as Burley's replacement, a man with a criminal record and limited high-level experience, the controversy only deepened. Even chief executive Phil Anderton, who tried to defend Romanov, was sacked shortly after for not justifying Burley's dismissal strongly enough in the press. The chaos that followed proved Burley's point. Chairman George Folks resigned in protest. Calls were made for the Financial Services Authority to investigate Hearts' ownership structure. The club that had been sitting pretty at the top of the league under Burley descended into turmoil and instability. George Burley's 2005 represents something bigger than just two controversial departures. It was the old guard of football management coming up against a new breed of owners and executives who wanted total control. The director of football model at Derby, Romanov's hands-on approach at Hearts, these were signs of how the game was changing, but Burley refused to change with it. He believed that managers should manage, that the person coaching the players day in and day out should have the final say on footballing matters. Some might call that stubborn, others would call it principled. His experiences serve as a warning about what happens when sporting expertise clashes with executive authority. Two clubs, two successful spells, two ugly endings, all because a good man wouldn't compromise his values for an easy life. Today, George Burley's reputation stands intact. The football world knows he was a victim of politics, not a perpetrator of unprofessionalism. His story reminds us that sometimes doing the right thing comes at a personal cost, but integrity is worth more than job security. At 69, he can hold his head high, knowing he never bent the knee to those who would have made him a puppet. That's not just good management, that's real character.